Right, good evening. We're back. And we are sponsored for the week by Rabbi Aaron and Evelyn Kislasi with profound Hakar Satov to Hashem in recognition of his kindness and protection over Dr. Moshe Greenbaum and his family. May the merit of this Daf Yomi learning bring them continued and constant shmira and bless their home with simcha, shalva, and only besorot tuvot. And we should just continue to
learning together.
Yep. So we are in Daf Yurchas. Off at the top, sort of at the top. Savar Rabbi Yehuda, where Savar Rabbi Yehuda, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down, I believe in the middle of the line. And what was going on is we had we decided there was a three-way argument in this Mishnah. We had discussed, right, whether if a person has intent to not consume, right? If a person is, like we had our Mishnah, which talked about eating something which isn't supposed to be eaten or burning something which isn't supposed to be burned. Mm-hmm. What if we have intent just to leave it over? So a three-way different dispute on the matter. Mm-hmm. The Rabbanan seemed to imply that there would be no problem with it, according to everybody, and the dispute over whether things could be eaten or not eaten, that was not related to just planning to leave it over. And then we had Rabbi Yehuda, who seems to say, no, everybody holds it's kosher. And Rabbi Elazar says, no, they even argue in that circumstance. So, amen. So, V'savar Rabbi Yehuda, let's question this Rabbi Yehuda's point. Rabbi Yehuda, is it true that Rabbi Yehuda says that lahaniach l'dam machar, person has intent, and he says that he's going to leave over from the blood till tomorrow. He doesn't plan on eating it tomorrow, right? That was we said for sure that was the machlokas. Rabbi Yehuda said that was permissible. So Rabbi Yehuda seems to imply that if he had in mind just to leave it over, though, that would be permissible. So is that true? That everybody agrees that it's puzzle. That Rabbi Yehuda would say that because Rabbi Yehuda holds, interestingly, that if you would do this action to the korban, then thinking about it would also invalidate it. Now, v'hatanya, we learn in a brisa, Amar Rabbi says, Keshahalachti lematzos midosai etel Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon. It's a great phrase. Matzos midosai, to drain the measures by Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon. Drain the measures. What they used to do is when they would sell things, people used to bring their own containers. It's kind of like now when you bring your own shopping bags to Sobeys, right? So back then they would come and you would buy oil, so you would bring your own container. Now, if you're buying something that's viscous, like oil, so when you dump, or honey, right, you dump it, part of it remains in the container. So you buy a cup of it, but you're only going to get like 3/4 of the cup. So draining the measures is that they would leave the cup suspended for a long time to let as much of it dump out as possible.
So the best thing to do is heat it up in water, make it more liquid.
You could, but the point is that it's a great phrase, which means to spend time someplace in order to get everything that you can out of it, right? That's a great way to describe going to yeshiva. I went there to drain the measures, right? Hang out, get everything that you can, right? So, lematzos midosai, right? He was trying to drain his measures, right? V'amri lo lematzos midosav, and some says meaning I was trying to drain his measures, meaning either that I was trying to remain there in order to be able to get all of my learning that I needed, or I was going to get all of his learning from him. Rabbi Elazar ben Shimua. Anyway, what happens is, Rabbi is telling the story. Matzasi Yosef Habavli. I saw a guy named Yosef Habavli, Yoshev Lefonov. He would sit before him. Vayechaviv lo biyoser. He was, the different ways of reading this phrase. We'll read it the way that, I think the second way in Rashi. He was very beloved to him. He was a great student. Ad la'achas, until everything was going smoothly, until they got to one halacha. It was one halacha that he just wouldn't accept. Amar lo Rebbe, he said to him, my teacher, hashochet es hazevach, if somebody slaughters a korban, laniach midamo lemachar, and he has in mind that he's not going to throw the blood today, he's going to wait till tomorrow. And of course, we know that the blood is puzzle as soon as it gets to be shkia, as soon as it gets to be nightfall, the blood is invalid. So if he thinks about that, does that invalidate? Mahu, so Amar lo, kosher. He said it's kosher, which follows the Rabbanan's opinion that we had yesterday, right? Arvis, so he asked him again at night. Amar lo, kosher. He said, no, it's kosher. So Shachris, the next morning, he gets up and he asks him the same question. Amar lo, kosher. He said, no, it's still kosher. Saharayim comes back and asks him in the afternoon, Amar lo, kosher. It's still kosher. Mincha time, he says, Amar lo, kosher, but fine. Ella, but Rabbi Eliezer posel. Rabbi Eliezer said that it was puzzle. Rabbi Eliezer said that there is a minority viewpoint that says it's puzzle. Tzavo panav shel Yosef Abavli. Yosef Abavli got all excited. When he heard that. Amar lo. So Elazar ben Shamua says to him, Yosef, kimedumani shelo kivananu Shmuel seinu ad ato. What is it like? You didn't like anything I had to say until now? All of a sudden, I kept telling you the halacha is it, and I tell you the minority opinion. All of a sudden, whoa, you're so excited. Amar lo, Rebbe Hain, he says, no, everything you told me is correct. I have no problem with anything that you told me. Ella, but I will tell you, Rabbi Yehuda, my former teacher was Rabbi Yehuda bar Eloi, and Pasol Shanali. He had taught me this halacha in this case and told me it was pasol. And you told me it was kosher. V'chazarti kol tamidav. I went to go ask all of his students. Ubikashti lachaver velo matzasi. And I tried to find anybody who would remember it the way I remembered it, and nobody remembered it my way. Good, make sure it's green. And nobody else remembered me. Akshav shishanisa li pasol. But now that you told me, Rabbi Eliezer says that it's pasol. Hechzarti li avedasi. So he says, so you have returned what I have lost. You've lost my lost teaching. I'm very excited because it makes sense that my Rabbi Yehuda was teaching me that opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Zagu einav d'maos shel Rabbi Eliezer ben Shemua. Listen to the reaction Rabbi Eliezer ben Shemua has. And I was going to bring the music. Sorry, Yehuda. I didn't.
Music?
Oh. You'll see. So,
which singer?
Just hang. Zalgu einav. I knew I said music. I would wake him back up. Zalgu einav demos. He started tearing up how beautiful this was that he got so excited to be able to figure out the teaching. Amar ashreichem talmidei chachamim. He says, happy are you, Talmidei Chachamim, shedivrei Torah chavivin aleichem. That's the one, right?
Be good right now.
Okay, so these are the because the words of the divrei Torah are so pure, are excessively beloved to them. Karalav Hamikra Hazeh, he said the following pasuk: Ma ahavti Torah secha kol hayom hisichasi. How much do I love your Torah all day long? That is my conversation, right? And hence the song, right? That's the song. Ha mipnei Rabbi Yehuda beno Rabbi Eloi. So therefore, if somebody is doing Musaf this week and throws this tune in, and only people Daf Yomi people will know, right?
Exactly.
So ha mipnei Rabbi Yehuda beno Rabbi Eloi. 1 second. Why? So what's going on? Rabbi Yehuda, who was his teacher, right, was the son of Rabbi Eloi. Rabbi Eloi talmido Rabbi Eliezer, and Rabbi Eloi was the student of Rabbi Eliezer. So it makes sense. This is what Elazar ben Shemua. This is what Elazar ben Shemua is figuring. Lefichach shanalach mishnas Rabbi Eliezer. Therefore, the reason why you remember him teaching you that the halacha was that it was pasol, even though the halacha is that it's kosher, he taught you the other opinion because Rabbi Yehuda learned it from his father Rabbi Eloi, who learned it from Rabbi Eliezer. Now, here's our problem. If Rabbi Yehuda was holding that everybody holds that it's pasol, right? That's what we had suggested. That was what caused this conversation come up. So I don't understand. So what was he so excited about? He said, you reminded me of my teaching. Well, no, because what you had learned is Rabbi Yehuda holds that everybody holds this pasol. And Iu plukta kamarle, and now Elazar ben Shemua told him it's an argument, right? That didn't tell him that Rabbi Yehuda holds everybody agrees to it. Ella mai kosher Rabbi Eliezer pasol. So he says rather just do elamai kosher elamai. We change the gears here. Plugsa kamarle. Elamai kosher. 1 second. Change the gear saw is to Vav. Ihunami plugta. So he says, okay, so he says, no, what happens is Ihunami plugta kamarle. He was telling him, Rabbi Eliezer even himself taught it as a argument. Elamai kosher, Rabbi Eliezer posel. So puzzle. So then, okay, so then what is he telling him? That Rabbi Eliezer says is puzzle. So that's what he taught him. So he hachi my ha mipnei onanami plugta kamasninon. So he says, then if that's the case, so then what is it that Rabbi Eliezer came and he said, because Rabbi Yehuda was the what? If he was telling him no, that he didn't hold it was an argument, everybody agreed with him. Then why was he telling him that he was only telling you this opinion because he was agreeing with his Rebbe's opinion? Rather, what happened was Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yehuda when he taught it to Rabbi Yosef, he taught it as everybody holds its puzzle. What did it mean when he said, you've returned my teach, but I lost? I just didn't know that anybody held it was puzzle. In other words, I understood that my Rebbe held everything, that it was 100% puzzle. I understand that you disagree and say it's kosher. I wasn't looking for somebody to explain to me that it was 100, that everyone agreed that it was puzzle. I understand that there's a Rabbanan Shita that it's kosher. I'm just looking to find somebody who ever said that it was puzzle so that it would reflect what I had remembered Rabbi Yehuda saying. So that's how he learns it. Okay. So says the next Mishnah. Lo yatzak lo balal. So if let's say in the Mishnah says, if you don't do any of these parts of the mincha offering, so then it's going to invalidate the offering. Okay? So if he doesn't pour the oil onto the mincha, or he doesn't blow balal, he doesn't mix the mincha, the oil and the flour together. Lo pieces, he doesn't break the pieces up. The procedure for breaking the pieces up was they would take the bread, they would fold it over in half, and then fold it over in quarters, and then break it along the folds. So they would have 4 parts, right? So he doesn't do that. Velo malach, he doesn't salt it. Velo hanif, or he doesn't wave it. Velo higish, he doesn't bring it to the mizbeach. O shepises on pitim merubos, or he breaks it into, let's explain it the simple way, into larger pieces.
What's a complicated way?
We're going to see that it's a machlokas in the Gemara how to explain that line. So at least we'll say that at this point we'll explain it simply, right? That that is breaking it into larger pieces. Velo mashchan, or he doesn't put oil onto the wafers after the shmearing. He's got to smear the wafers after the fact. So he forgets to do any of these parts. Kshera. So the mincha is still kosher. Right, even though those are mitzvos part to do, but they don't.
How do we kosher if we got to do most of the important stuff?
These are not the important. That's the point. These are not the ikuv. These are not the required parts. We're going to see now in the Mishnah which parts of the mincha, although these are all parts of things that you do during a korban mincha, which of these are essential. My lo yatzak. What does it mean when we say he didn't pour the oil? So ilema lo yatzakal. Does the Mishnah mean he didn't pour any oil in? Well, that can't be because ikuvaksiv ba. That is required, right? You can't skip an ingredient, right? If the mincha offering calls for oil and you don't put oil in, it's not proper. Ella, what it means is lo yatzak kohen elazar. The kohen doesn't pour it. Only a non-kohen does the pouring. Ihachi, if that's true, so then go to the next one. Lo balal nami. So when it says he didn't mix it, so what does mix it mean? Lo balal kohen elazar. We should also explain because the Mishnah has to be consistent. So it should mean that the kohen didn't mix it, but the non-kohen mixed it. That's why it's invalid. Halo balal klau, which would mean that if you didn't mix it at all, what would happen? It would be psula. It would be pasul, but that's not true. V'hatnan on Yud Chesam Beis, we learned in a Mishnah, shishim nivlolin shishim ve'echad ein nivlolin. So there are a couple of explanations for this Mishnah, which we're going to learn later on. But here it tells us that either you could mix 60. You could expand your mincha offering to be as large as 60 isronim, right, which are tenths of an ephah. And so if you expand it that large, So the question is, how many lugin of oil do you need to bring with it? So this is where the argument and interpretation is. Either one interpretation is that you need to have one lug of oil, even for that entire larger amount of flour, of I guess wafer pieces or whatever it is, and you can mix it up together. Once you get more than 60, the oil doesn't mix it well, and so you'd have to add more oil. But since you can't add more oil, so then it's going to become you can't add more than that. The other way of saying this is that every isar needs its own oil. Nevertheless, once you put so much in, the container won't hold all that much, and you won't be able to mix it well. Vehavinan ba. And so we talked about that case. Ki enam nivlolin my havi. What difference does it make if you can't mix it? Who cares? So you can't mix it. Vatznan, we learn a Mishnah. Lo balal kshira. If you didn't mix it, it's completely kosher. You don't have to mix it at all. Vamar Reb Zera explains, Kol haroy lebila ein bila makevesbo. The rule is that it has to be able to be mixed. Once it's able to be mixed, you don't have to mix it. But it has to be physically capable of being mixed. The kol shein roy lebila, but if it's too much quantity such that you can't possibly mix it, bila makevesbo. Then the fact that you can't mix it makes it unmixable, and now it's not valid. So mixing is not required, but the ability to mix it is required. Now,
it has to be thin enough to be mixed.
It has to, and in such large quantities, you're not going to be able to mix it. So now, what does this tell us? You don't have to mix the offering. So how are we explaining our Mishnah to be that if you didn't mix it, it's puzzle because it's only mixing with a non-Kohen that is kosher? No. Midi area, that's not necessarily true because ha-kadisa. The case of the pouring of the oil and the case of the mixing are different. The case of the pouring of the oil is being done by a non-Kohen. The case of the mixing is being done by nobody. Even if you didn't mix it, it's still kosher. Lo yatzak Kohen. When it says didn't pour, that means a Kohen didn't pour. Elazar, non-Kohen poured it. Lo balal, when it doesn't mix, lo balal klal, means that nobody mixed it. It wasn't mixed at all. And that's the way you interpret our Mishnah. It's not the nicest way. It's not a consistent way to interpret our Mishnah, but we're okay with interpreting our Mishnah, saying each one of these items is its own independent case. Okay, next case of the Mishnah was Osha Pitasa Pitim Merubos Kshira. He broke the pieces into merubos, then it's kosher, into large pieces. Now, Hashta Lo Pises Klau Kshira. Before in this Mishnah it said, if you don't break it up at all, it's kosher. So now, pitim merubos mi boy. So if it's big pieces, well, of course, then it's okay, right? Obviously, if you cut it into quarters, that would be the right way, right? If I don't cut it at all, it's kosher. So if I do it in half, of course it's kosher, right? So no, my pitim merubos, the answer is, when it says break it into pitim that are merubos, doesn't mean large pieces, sheriba bipsisin. It means that you have many pieces. It's two small pieces. You broke it into too many small pieces. Still kosher. V'ibay say, Merelzal can answer. Liolam pitim merubos, we're talking about large pieces. Mamish, umihu mahu detema. What would you have thought? Why would you have thought it wasn't good? Hasam hu deika toras chalos aleim. Because you only have two choices. Either it's a chala, it's a whole piece, or it's broken up correctly. But here, you didn't break it up properly and you didn't keep it whole.
When you break it properly, you mean like
into quarters.
Like a nice piece.
No, into quarters, right? You take it and you're going to fold it in half and fold it in half again. So, kamash malon, so no, that even if you break it into larger pieces, it's still kosher. Lema masnis into lo Rabbi Shimon, but let's say our Mishnah doesn't follow Rabbi Shimon's opinion. Detanya, we're going to brisa. Rabbi Shimon says, Kol Kohen, she'ena modeh ba'avoda, any Kohen who doesn't agree with the service, doesn't do the service properly, agree with the services, ein lo chilik bekuna. He cannot get any of the Kohen gifts. Prerequisite for being because they had problems with the tzedukim, right? So therefore right? If you're going to dispute any of the services, you're out. You don't get it.
If a Kohen disputes or doesn't do things properly, could they take away his kahuna from?
You can't take away his kahuna, but you can take away his ability to get the gifts, the benefits. Shenamar, because the pasuk says, "Hamakrif es dam hashlamim v'esachilev mibnei Aaron lo siyah." The blood, the one who brings the korban of the blood and the shlamim and the fats from the sons of Aaron, he gets the gifts, right? So what are the gifts? Shok hayamin lemana. He gets the chest and the right foreleg, as his gifts. Now, mod ba'avoda yesh lo chelek bekahuna. If he agrees to the service, he gets a portion in the kuna. Sheino mod ba'avoda ein lo chelek bekahuna. But if he doesn't, he has no portion in the kuna. That's what Rabbi Shimon says. Okay. Ve'ein li elazu bilvad. So now this pasuk seems to imply this service, right? That this blood service, throwing the blood, is the service that is required. How do I know? Minayin l'rabos tesvav avodos. How do I know to include 15 other services as well? So what are the 15 services? Yitzikos, the pouring of the oil, belilos, the mixing, hapesisos, breaking the loaves up, hamalichos, salting. Anything that goes on the mizbeach needs salt. That's why we put salt on our challah when we are on a table. Vatnufos, the wavings, v'hagoshos, bringing the mincha close to the mizbeach, v'akmitzos, taking the
Where do we
kmitza.
get salting on the onion or garlic from?
Salting of an onion or garlic. When do we salt an onion or garlic?
Don't you keep?
That just tastes good.
I mean, no. If you want to put it in the fridge, you want to keep it in the fridge.
Oh well, yeah, but I think that is because we want to prevent the moisture from being affected to it. There is a problem with that that these onions and garlics may attract shadim or other things. But we'll wait another. We'll get around back to those gemaras. I have to recall exactly which are the rules of which of those things. Leaving out, you can't leave open water containers or peeled onions or peeled eggs or any of those kinds of things. Yeah. So also right, because that's why you're in kashrus, so that you wrap everything in plastic well, right?
Yeah.
There you go. So there you go. And if you put salt on it, it prevents the snakes or whatever that would put venom or whatever in from getting it to them. So that's what.
The customers might get a better flavor with the.
But that is not connected to the reason why we put salt on the challah, right? We put salt in because anything that goes in the mizbeach gets salt.
I'm sorry for bringing up the question.
That's right. Nope, don't be apologizing. Just different. Salt is consistent, but the reason is different. V'akmitzos, taking the kmitzos, v'haktaros, burning anything on the mizbeach. V'amalikos, doing the malik on the birds. V'hakabolos, catching the blood. V'hazos, the sprinklings of the blood. V'hashkos, sota, the sota drinking the waters. V'harifos egla, breaking the neck of the animal when there's a murder and you don't know who did it between the two hounds. V'taharas mitzora, and the purification of the person who has tzaras. Unesios kapayim, and duchening, right? When the kohanim raise their hands. Bein mi befnim, bein mi bachutz, right? Any of the services, whether they are inside the Beis Hamikdash area or whether they are in the courtyard area. Where did I go?
So these are all avodas that the Kohen has to accept.
They has to make sure he has to be able to agree all of those things, right? And this Nesias Kapayim is whether we're doing. Sorry, this is the Nesias Kapayim is whether the Nesias Kapayim is done. Is the Nesias Kapayim is done in the Azara of the Beis Hamikdash or Bachut in every city, right? Kohanim Duchen in every city, right? Is it Minayin? How do I know that if he says I don't do any of those services, he loses his shares of the Kohen gifts? Talmud Lomer pasuk says Mibnei Aaron, from the children of Aaron. Avoda hamasura libnei Aaron, any of the work that is given over to the children of Aaron. Kol kohen she'eno modeba, if any kohen doesn't agree to do that service, in lo chilik bekohuna, he has no portion of the benefits, right? He's got to do the service. So therefore, Rabbi Shimon seems to disagree, right? Because Rabbi Shimon, our Mishnah doesn't seem to hold like Rabbi Shimon, right? Because our Mishnah seems to say, you don't need to do these services, right? So, Amar Rav Nachman lo kasha, kan b'minchas kohanim, kan b'minchas Yisrael. He says, no, it's a difference of viewpoint here, but it's not a contradiction. It's just if you're talking about two different types of offerings. The mincha of the brisa is talking about the mincha that's being brought by the kohanim. If a kohen has to bring a korban mincha, and the Mishnah is talking about the mincha of Yisrael. Why? Minchas Yisrael debas kmitzahi. The mincha of the Yisrael has to get a kmitza. So therefore, mi kmitza ve'elech mitzvahs kehuna. Therefore, since kmitza is a kohen service, so from kmitza on, from the time you take the kmitza and you bring it close to the mizbeach, etc., those are all things the kohen must do. So now, our Mishnah said that you don't have to pour the oil, right? So therefore, since pouring of the oil is before you take the kmitza, it doesn't have to be done by a kohen. So therefore, it doesn't contradict Rabbi Shimon, who says that all these services have to be done with a kohen, but pouring of the oil is not one of them. Okay, so So therefore, limid al yitzika ubelila shekshir bazar. This tells me that the pouring and the mixing are permissible by a non-Kohen. Those could be done by the non-Kohen. That's what our Mishnah is saying. Minchas Kohanim, however, when Rabbi Shimon is saying, the Brisa, when he says that, no, you have to pour or else the Kohen loses his chelek, he's not allowed to do that. The Kohen has to do the pouring of the oil. That's different. That is b'minchas Kohanim, that is by the mincha of the Kohanim. Delav bas kmitzahi. The mincha of the Kohanim is entirely burnt. You don't take a kmitza and burn the kmitza.
So it's like a korban olah for a coin.
It's like a korban olah for, right, the whole thing is being burnt. And so therefore there's no kmitza to it. Since there's no kmitza, you can't say that from the kmitza on is Kohen service. Everything is Kohen service. So therefore, meikara by kahuna, from the very beginning of the offering, you need a Kohen. So therefore, for the Kohen service, the Kohen has to pour the oil. For the Yisrael service, a non-Kohen can pour the oil, mix the oil. Then once the Kohen comes in and takes the kmitza, then he takes over. Amalei Rava says, Mechti. Let's take a look at this for a second. He says, Minchas Kohanim mehecha is Rabbi liyitzika. One second. How do you know in the first place that the mincha that the Kohanim bring it needs pouring of the oil in the first place? Minchas Yisrael. That is derived from the psukim, which are similar by a regular mincha that a Jewish person brings. By the minchas Yisrael, it says v'yatzakta l'shemen mincha hi. It says that's in Parak Beis pasuk Vav Vayikra that you're supposed to pour oil on it. And then the Chazal learn from that the word mincha means every mincha needs this oil. So therefore, if the mincha of a Yisrael doesn't need a Kohen, then you're learning mincha of Kohanim from that. A mincha of the Kohen shouldn't need a Kohen either. So mahasam kshir bazar af hacha nami kshir bazar. If the regular Yisrael's mincha is kosher with a non-Kohen, so too a Kohen's mincha needs to be kosher with a non-Kohen, doing the oil and the mixing. So Ikka de Amri, there are those who say Amar Rav Nachman lo kasha. The Rav Nachman answered that it's not a contradiction. Kan ben nikmatzos, kan b'shein nikmatzos. He says that the Mishnah is talking about when there's a Mishnah, when there's a mitzvah of kmitza, and the Bryce is talking about when there's no kmitza, and so therefore, since there's no mitzvah of kmitza, so then you are going to learn that there's a distinction in the offering, and Amar late to which this is where Amar le Rava. This is where Rava jumps in and he says, no, Michti, you can't say where there's kmitza or not kmitza, that's going to make the difference. Michti, because she'ein nikmitzos hecha is Rabbi litzika, the ones that don't get a kmitza, i.e. the Kohen ones, where do they learn that you're supposed to pour the oil? So we learn that nikmatzos from the ones that do get a kmitza, the regular Yisrael offerings. So mahasam kshir bazar, since the ones that are Yisraelim are kosher by azar, af hachanami kshir bazar, so to the ones by that have no kmitza are also kosher by azar. I don't think there's a practical difference between the two versions of this, right? One is just saying it's a kosher offering, and the other side is saying that one has kmitza and one doesn't have kmitza, which is the same thing. So I'm not really sure that I see a practical distinction between the two. It's just whether that was the language that was used.
Right. Would Rashi say something about it?
Yeah, I think that there's something here. He says, not Rashi, but here. There are other types of minchas that don't have kmitza, other than a Kohen, is what he's saying. Minchas Nesachim, for example. Minchas Nesachim, that's the mincha that comes with animals, and those are entirely burnt also, and you don't do kmitza by those, so that would be included. That's the practical difference between the two. Okay, that's from, that is from Rashi. Okay, that's from Rashi. I didn't see it inside here, Rashi. So there you go. Okay, good, Yehuda. Nice. Yeah. So now, Ella machvarta masnisin lo Rabbi Shimon. Therefore, no, we don't want to say that. Clearly, our Mishnah doesn't hold like Rabbi Shimon, right? Our Mishnah seems to imply a non-Kohen can get away with it, and Rabbi Shimon says, no, non-Kohen can't get away with it. Okay, my taima derabanan. What is the reason why the Chachamim in our Mishnah say that a non-Kohen can pour the oil? Amar Krok, because the pasuk says, "V'yatzok aleh hashemen," that you're supposed to pour oil on it. V'nasan aleh lavona, and you're supposed to put frankincense on it. Ve'evi el bnei Aaron HaKohen, and then you bring it to Aaron the Kohen. the kamatz, and then he does kmitza. So you see, there it is, right there. Mi kmitza ve'elach mitzvahs kuna. First comes the pouring of the oil, and then put the frankincense. Then, once you do that, then bring it to the Kohen, and he does kmitza. All those first stages were before the Kohen got involved.
I thought only the Kohen is allowed to put the korban on the mizbeach.
On the mizbeach, right. This is putting it into the utensil to set it up in the first place, right? This is putting it into the utensil. Limed al yitzika ubelila. This tells me that the pouring of the oil into the container in the first place and the mixing, shikshir bazar, is okay with a non-Kohen. Rabbi Shimon says, no, b'nei Aaron, not Kohanim. Right? He learned it from the pasuk Yud Tesem Aleph, from the sons of Aaron, the Kohanim. Mikra nidrash. Right? So he, mikra nidrash lefanav ula acharav. He has to learn that when the pasuk says you bring it to the Kohen, you have to learn backwards and forwards in the pasuk. Meaning, clearly, if you read the context of the pasuk says, put this in, put the oil in, bring it to the Kohen, and the Kohen does kmitza. No, the way Rabbi Shimon learns psukim is that whatever happens first, and then bring it to the Kohen means the first part has to be brought to the Kohen, and the second part has to be brought to the Kohen. You don't learn this pasuk as chronologically. There's before the Kohen, then after the Kohen. It's just as soon as it says bring it to the Kohen, it means the Kohen goes both directions in this pasuk. Both the stuff that we mentioned already is done in front of the Kohen by the Kohen, and the stuff that we're going to mention is also brought to the Kohen. Now the problem is the Savar Rabbi Shimon mikron nidrish lefanav v'rachav. I'll show you another place. Rabbi Shimon teaches a drasha, and he doesn't learn that you learn the pasuk forwards and backwards. And this is stuff we learned in Maseches Zvachim, so it should sound familiar. V'atani, we're in a brisa. The Kohen is going to take from the blood of the chatas in his finger, on his finger. V'nosan al karnos mizbeach be'etzba'o, and he's going to place it on the corner of the mizbeach with his finger. Now, v'lakach says you're supposed to take it. Melamid shlote kabbalah el biyamin. Now, this pasuk says be'etzba'o. We learned be'etzba'o means right finger. Now, etzba'o is in the middle of the pasuk. It says the Kohen shall take from the blood be'etzba'o, and then afterwards it says v'nosan. And then he should put it, betzbo. This is two different things that he's doing. First, he's catching the blood from the animal. Now, so Yehuda's jumping in here and saying, look, because the word etzba'o comes in the middle of the pasuk. Everything up until it says etzba'o doesn't have to be done with your right hand. Then from etzba'o on has to be done with your right hand. But, says the way we're learning the pasuk, not so. Betzbo is, even though etzbo is in the middle of the pasuk, it refers to the things before it and after it. So therefore, melamid shlote kabbalah el b'yamin, you have to catch the blood with your right hand. Betzba'o, that it's because it says betzba'o. V'nasan, melamid shlote nesina el b'yamin, and also you have to apply it to the mizbeach with your right hand. Amar Rabbi Shimon says, no, that's not true. V'chi nemar yad be'kabbalah. It doesn't say that which hand he has to use by catching the blood. Ho v'lo nemar yad be'kabbalah. Since it doesn't say that, as Yehuda pointed out, so kibbel b'smol kosher, if you catch it with your left hand, it would be kosher. Now, the problem is, that's Rabbi Shimon. Right. So Rabbi Shimon is learning, no, from etzbo onward. How can you then say that Rabbi Shimon was learning by the Kohen being needed for the pouring of the oil, that you learn what's backwards and forwards? V'amar Abaye, Rabbi explains it, but migrash nidrish lefanav v'lacharav kamiflagi. The argument there is whether we learn the pasuk with the words in the pasuk to go backwards and forwards or not, and therefore we see Rabbi Shimon doesn't hold that way. Ella, so rather hachi time with Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon is not because you're right. Rabbi Shimon always learns forwards. Okay, so therefore it's not going to be the explanation. Let me just grab that. That's correct. All right. It shows that we record live before a studio audience.
Whatever it is and all. It's not good cover or anything. Right.
So we have to have another explanation for why it is that Rabbi Shimon is going to say that this service of the Kohen, right, has to apply to what's written before. And he says the answer is, Hachi time of the Rabbi Shimon, this is Rabbi Shimon's reason, Vehevia, and he shall bring it to the Kohen is with a vav, and therefore Mosif al Inyan Rishon. The vav means, and also bring it to the Kohen, meaning, not only what you did before goes to the Kohen, and also bring this to the Kohen. That's what the vav does. So he says, since the vav is in the middle, the vav into the pasuk tells us that the previous section also has to be brought to the Kohen. Now, 1 second. Rabbi Shimon doesn't learn that way. Rabbi Shimon vav mosif elin yarishon. Does Rabbi Shimon hold that the vav tells us that it applies before and afterwards? El me'at, if that's true, Siv. Look at this pasuk. This pasuk says, "V'shachat es habakar v'hikrivu b'nei Aaron hakohanim es adam." They slaughter the animal, and then the children of Aaron bring the blood. V'zarku es adam, and then they throw the blood. Mikabel ve'elach mitzvahs kahuna. That pasuk tells us the order. From the time the Kohanim catch the blood onward, that's when Kohanim are involved. Melamid al shchita shikshir bizar, which we know that means that the slaughtering can be done by a non-Kohen. Well, either Rabbi Shimon vav mosif al inyan rishon. If Rabbi Shimon holds that when you've got a vav, it means that you have to apply that which is before it also. So shchita hachinami bizar teipsula. So then shchita should also be pasul, because the pasuk said v'shachat es ben habakar vehikrivu b'nei Aaron hakohen es adam. The vav vehikrivu should tell me also the shchita is included in needing a kohen. No, shani hasam. That's different, because damar kro, the pasuk says v'samach v'shachat. The pasuk before tells us that when a person is bringing a korban, one of the first things he has to do is he has to do smicha, right? He has to lean on it and confess his averos onto the animal, and then he slaughters it. Ma smicha bezarim, obviously that the smicha is done by the owner of the sacrifice, is done by the non-kohen. Av shchita bezarim.
When you do kaparas, you're showing the chicken on your head, saying
that is, it is similar, yes, except that we don't swing it, we lean on it, right? This shchita is done by non-kohanim. Yeah, but I ma smicha bebalim, af shchita bebalim. So maybe you would say, okay, well, if that's the case, then just as smicha has to be done by the owner of the sacrifice, the shchita also must be done by the owner of the sacrifice, not just anybody. So no, hahu lo matzasamart, that you can't say, because kal v'chomer, there's a kal v'chomer here. Ma zrika diker kapara lo boi balim, if throwing of the blood, which is the main part of the sacrifice, that doesn't require the owner. Shchita delavik or kapara lo koshkin. Shchita, which is not the main part of the sacrifice, for sure it doesn't require the owner. V'chi tema in donin efshar mishi I efshar. 1 second. You can't learn the question from what's possible from what's impossible. It's impossible that the owner could sprinkle the blood because he's not a Kohen. But the owner could do the shchita because the shchita is permissible. So gali rachmana b'yom HaKippurim. So no, the answer is the Torah specifically says this rule by Yom Kippur. V'shachat espara chatas asher lo, that the Aaron has to slaughter the bull which is his. Meaning, when does the owner have to slaughter it? Only on Yom Kippur, when Aaron HaKohen brings a bull that is his bull to atone for his family's averos, then it's his bull and he does the slaughtering. Otherwise, shchita is never done by the owner. That's what it's telling us. Mikal the shchita b'yama lo b'im ba'alim.
Is he allowed to shecht it in the Kodesh HaKadoshim?
He doesn't shecht in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. He shechts it in the Azara. So he says we talked about whether you could shecht it in the Heichal, and then we said perhaps yes, but it is not appropriate to do it. Amarav, kol makom shenamar Torah vechuka. Okay, so now, anytime in all of these rules, we're going to try to figure out which of the services of the mincha are required and which ones are mitzvos that are not required. So you've got every time the Psukim says Torah vechuka, it uses the word Torah and chuka, eno el akev. It means to tell me that service is required. Kasal kadaitich tarti bainin. At first we thought that what Rav meant to say was, you need both of those words. You need the word Torah and chukah in the pasuk. For example, kedichsiv, zos chukas ha-Torah, right? This is by the Nazir. This is the rule of the Torah of the Nazir. Now, I'm sorry, not by the Nazir. That is by Vav, zos chukas ha-Torah. This is...
Torah? Yeah,
that's by... Is that by the Paraduma? Yeah, that's by the Paraduma. So therefore, that says, just as an example, that's Zos Chukas HaTorah. This is by the Paraduma. This has everything that's written there is critical to the service. So now we're going to go through 7 examples of things, and we're going to try the way to remember is Natat Yakmal, right? The nun is for Nazir. We're going to start off with Hari Nazir, Jelo Ksiva Be Ela Torah. The word Nazir, the Psukim only say the word Torah. It doesn't say Chok. It only says Torah. Pasuk says V'zos Torah Zevach Hashem Mashiach Yakriv Lo Lashem. So therefore, it says Torah. It doesn't say that.
Why does it only say Torah for the Nazir?
Oh, because that in itself just you don't need the word Chukah and Torah. Apparently, only the word Torah. Utnan, and we learned in a Mishnah, Right. Sorry. Skip. Sorry. Nazir ksiva bei ela Torah v'amar Rav, and Rav said, "Tenufa ben Nazir ma'akeves." That waving by the Nazir is required. Now, it only says Torah. So, no, that doesn't prove anything. Geshani Hasam, that's different over there because Kevin Dixiv, Kain Ya'aseh. Right? It says, so you shall do it. That's another way to know that it's required because Dixiv Bahu Chuka Dami. It's like it's though it says Chuka, even though it doesn't say Chuka. Okay, what about the next one? Hare Toda. What about the Korban Toda? Delo Ksiva Be Ella Torah. It only has the word Torah written by that one. Right? That one is Torah, Zos Torah, Zevach Hashem Shikra Vashem. That was the one. That was that one. The first one was Zos Torah on Nazir. So therefore, the word Torah is written by that one, but it doesn't say the word Chukah. Utnan, we're in a Mishnah. Arba shed batoda me'akvin zazeh. The 4 sets of loaves are required. If any of them are missing, it's not a korban. Doesn't work. They're ma'akvin zazeh. So shani toda. So why is that? Because the toda is different again. The iskish Nazir. Because we make a connection between the Nazir and the Toda. Dichsiv, because the pasuk says, Al Zevach Todas Shlamav, on the Korban Toda of his Shlamim. So therefore, Shlamav, his Shlamim, L'Rabos Shalmi Nazir comes to include also the rule we make a connection between the Toda and the Nazir to tell me by the Nazir how much bread, and that's the same volume size, the same size of breads. You only bring 2 sets of breads by the Nazir, but those breads are brought in the same sizes as the korban of the korban Toda. But they're connected. So therefore, if Toda is required, so too everything in the Shlamim is in the Nazir is required. Sorry, everything in the Nazir is required, then the Toda is required. Okay, so now V'harei Mitzorah, let's get to the next one about Mitzorah. Delo ksiv bei ela Torah. It also says only the word Torah by the Mitzorah. Utnana, we learned in the Mishnah. Arba minin shebe Mitzorah ma'akvin zazeh. So all 4 of the different types that he has to bring, which is the Eitz Erez, which is the hyssop tree, the cedar tree, the Azov, the hyssop, the Shni Tolas, and the crimson string, and the Tziporim and the birds. All those are the things that are required for him to bring. All of them are required. So Shani Hasam, that's different. Kevin Dichsiv, Zos Tiyeh, Torah Mitzorah. This shall be. So since it says this shall be, means it's required. Command Dichsiv Be Chuka, it's like Chuka Dami, it says though it says Chuka. So all of these are examples where it doesn't say the word Chuka and Torah, but nevertheless, there's another reason to say it's required. Vare Yom HaKippur, what about Yom Kippur? Delo Ksiv Be Ela Chuka. It doesn't say both Torah and Chuka, it just says the word Chuka. Utnan, and we learned in a Mishnah. Shnei Siri Yom HaKippur Makvin Zazeh. The 2 goats are required. Right, you can't have one goat without the other. Ella, O Torah, O Chuka. So rather, we're going to say, no, from now on we understand it differently. What Rav meant to say is, if you have the word Torah or you have the word Chuka, it is required. You don't need both. V'harei shar korbanot tichsiv behu Torah v'lo ma'akvi. What about other things, other korbanos, where it says the word Torah, but it doesn't mean that they're required? So the answer is, Torah boi chuka v'chuka lo boi Torah. When you have the word Torah, you need to have the word chukah also for it to be required. But if you have the word chukah, you don't need the word Torah. Torah v'chukah kamar. But one second, that's not what Rav says. Rav says you need the word Torah and chukah. So hachi kamar, this is how you explain Rav. Afal gav dichsiv Torah. What he means is, even though the word Torah is written by these different korbanos, iksiv chukah in ilolo. If it also has the word chukah, then it is. Otherwise, not. Chukah is required. So if it has the word chukah by itself, that's good. And even though you'll find many different places that says the word Torah itself doesn't mean that it's required. Chukah is the word that makes it required. What about V'harei mincha, dichsiv b'chukah? What about the mincha, where we're going to see that it has the word chukah by there? Rav says, Kol makom shechzir kasa b'Torah's mincha, eno el la'akev, that when it comes to the mincha, everything has to be written twice in order to tell me that it's required. That was another thing that we learned by Kodshim, that if it's written 2 times, then it's required. So why is that? Why does it need to be written twice? If it says the word chukah by the Korban Mincha, everything should be required anyway. You don't need to write it twice. So hechzir in, lo hechzir lo. It needs to be repeated. No, shani hasam, this is different because the ksiva chukah, achila ksiva. When it says the word chukah, it's talking about the eating of the korban. It's not talking about the actual korban itself. Yeah, but Vare Lechem Apanim, what about the Lechem Apanim? Dikhi Ksiva, Chuka, Achila Ksiva, that by the Lechem Apanim, we know that it's all parts of the Lechem Apanim are required, as we're going to see in a moment. And the word Chuka is written by the eating of the Lechem Apanim. And nevertheless, how are we going to learn, if it's talking about the eating, how are we going to learn that the entire service is required? Tonight we learn a Mishnah. Shnei Sidirei Sidarim Me'akvin Zazeh. You need the 2 stacks of 6 loaves, right? You need Shnei Bazichin. You need the 2 spoons, Ma'akvin Zazeh. They were both required. Hasidarim Ha'bazichin Ma'akvin Zazeh. If you have one of the spoons missing, then the loaves are no good. The loaves are missing, the spoons are no good. Nothing's good unless everything is there. Ella, so rather, Kol Heichid Diksiva Achila Akula Milsach Ksiva. You're right. Whenever it says the word chukah, it means the entire korban. So everything is required by the lechem apanim. Why? Because it says the word chukah. Now we have to go back. So then why is it that by a mincha, everything isn't required? Like we had the pouring of the oil or the mixing or all those things are not required. Shani hasam, there it's different, because the pasuk specifically says, migresha umishamna, that from its fine flour and from its oil. Yudtas Mabez, Gerish Vishemen Ma'akvin Ve'in Davar Acher Ma'akiv. It's telling me that the only things that are required by the mincha are the flour and the oil, nothing else, right? Mm-hmm. So if anything else from the mincha is missing, it is not required. So therefore, even though it says the word chukah to include everything, then it specifies only these 2 things. So those are the only things that are required. All of the other parts of the mincha offering can be excluded. Okay, now, Gufa, Amarav. Let's go back over the statement that Rav made. Rav says, anytime something is repeated by the korban mincha, it means that that's a required service. Ushmuel Amar, Gerish Vishemen Ma'akvin Ve'en Davar Acher Ma'akiv. Shmuel says, only the flour and the oil are required, nothing else. Shmuel, one second, what's Shmuel saying? Even though it says twice, it's not required. Why should that be? Right? So what else? Ella, so what he means to say, anytime the pasuk says it twice, vaday ma'akva, for sure it's required. V'hacha, but here, b'melo kumtso, when it comes to his fistful, right? Bekumtso kamiflagi, that is the fact, but it says "Melom kumtso bekumtso k'miflagi." It's written twice. One time it's talking about the filling of his kmitza, and then it says "Melom kumtso." Again, the question is whether that is required, whether this kmitza is required or not. So, the Tanyas who learned in the Brisa. Let's explain this. Melo kumtso bekumtso. So these psukim are. The Kamas Misham Melokum Tzos Vayikra Beis, and then in another place in Perik Vav Pasuk Ches in Vayikra that you're going to take from Vehirim Imenu Bekum Tzo. So it's listed twice. The Kohen is supposed to take his kemitza with his hand. So now, meaning Shalo Yasem Midal Kometz. You can't make a measurement for the kemitza. Let's say this Kohen doesn't like to mess his hands up. So what he does is he figures out the exact size of his fistful and he makes a measurement for his fistful. Cannot do that. Rav Savar, so that's what this is for, because it's now Rav Savar ha nami tna bekra. So Rav says, right, the way that I know that you can't take it out with a utensil is because the pasuk is saying it is saying it twice, because the pasuk says that he's going to bring the mincha and he's going to fill up his fist from it, right? So therefore, you see from there that you have to fill it up with your fist, right? And not with a kli. Now, since he has this pasuk telling us that rule, then why is the word kemitza written twice? To tell me that the kemitza is ma'akev, that I need to do the kemitza. If I don't do the kemitza, it invalidates the sacrifice. Shmuel says, no, that pasuk, which is in Vayikra Perik Tes pasuk Yud Zayin, is lidoros, is doros. Is shah, meaning that pasuk is talking about a korban that was brought in the midbar and never again. So he says, doros misha lo yalfinon. You can't learn a rule by korbanos forever, from korbanos that were brought in the times of the setting up of the Mishkan. Rules were different. Those were special korbanos. So since you can't learn it from that one, that pasuk doesn't count. Therefore, the only way I know not to use a utensil is from those original two psukim. Well, if I already used the second pasuk for something, then it's not doubled. And if it's not doubled, then it's not required. That's why he says only the flour and the oil are required, not the kmitza, because that is not doubled. V'lo yolav Shmuel doros misha. 1 second, are you telling me that Shmuel doesn't learn something that is from old generations, from something that was brought one time? Ve'hatnan, we learned in a Mishnah, kli halach mekachin halach. We had this before, Mishnah, we've quoted this before. If I've got a utensil that is used for measuring liquids, then it can sanctify liquids. Umidas yavish mekachis yavish. A dry measure can sanctify dry measures. Vein kli halach mekachis yavish. But a liquid utensil cannot be used to sanctify dry measures. V'lo midas yavish mekachis halach. And not the dry measures can't be used to consecrate the liquids. V'amar Shmuel, to which Shmuel replies, Lo shana elamidos. That's just talking about the measuring containers. Aval mizrakos, the basins themselves, mekanchin, they can sanctify. How do I know? Dichsiv, because the pasuk says when the Nesiim brought their korbanos, it says shnei maleim soles. Both of them were filled with soles, and the soles was a mixture of oil and flour, and it was sanctified. Shani Halsam, that's different. Detana bakra tracer zimnin. That's different. You know why that he learns from that one? Because it's written 12 times. So once you write it that many times, it shows that it is a required part of the service.
Mentioned 12 times, you may get sick of it.
Well, yeah. Well, we love it.
I tell me about it, but yeah.
Amar le Rav Kahana v'Ravasi l'Rav. So Rav Kahana and Ravasi say to Rav, v'harei hagosha. What about bringing something close to the mizbeach? Right? Detana beikra, the pasuk says twice, right? V'lo ma'akva, but it's not required. It's not a required service. So how come? Man tana be. What does it say? Dichsiv, the pasuk says, Zos Torah Mincha hakarov akrevosa bnei Aaron lifnei Hashem. Right, this is the rules of the mincha that the children of Aaron should bring it close to Hashem. Hakug likvoa lemakom hu da'asa. That isn't to tell me that you have to bring it close. That is to tell me the location of where I'm supposed to bring it. How so? Detanya, we learn a brisa. Lifnei Hashem, you have to bring it before Hashem. Yachol b'ma'arav. So you might think that that the location that I'm supposed to bring the blood, or I'm sorry, with this, I guess this is the Marav. Sorry, this is the location of the Hagash of where I'm supposed to touch the mincha to the mizbeach. You might think it means before Hashem means before on the west side. Why? There's a little diagram Rashi you can see. Yep. So that is that when you walk out the door of the Heichal, when you walk out the door of the Beis Hamikdash, you meet the mizbeach's west side. So Talmud Lomar, therefore it says, El Pnei Mizbeach, that it has to be on the face, the front of the Mizbeach. What's the front of the Mizbeach? That's the side where the ramp is. That's the south side. So El Pnei Mizbeach, if the pasuk would have said to put it on the face of the Mizbeach, Yachol B'Dorim, I might think you got to do it on the south side. Talmud Lomar, therefore it says Lifnei Hashem, it has to be in front of Hashem. So Aketza, how are you supposed to do that? How are you supposed to put it on the west side and on the south side simultaneously? Magisha B'Karen Dromis Maravis, you touch it on the corner of the southwest corner. Keneged Chudosho Karen, on the sharp part of the corner. Vidayo, and that's good. Now, that's what the first opinion says. Rabbi Eliezer says, Yochel Yagi Shena Lemarava Shokeren. You might think that you're supposed to bring it to the west side of the ramp, Lidroma Shokeren, Amart. So it says, and then it says, to the south of, you might think you could put it on the west side of the corner or on the south side of the corner. Amart, but you say, Kol Mokum Shata Motzi Shtei Mikros, but here's the rule. Whenever you have two psukim, so then Echad Mekayim Atzmo Mekayim Chavero, you can interpret it one way in order to satisfy both psukim. Ve'echad Mekayim Atzmo Mevatos Chavero, but you can interpret it another way, in which case you can only follow one of the psukim, not the other one. Manichan Eshem Mekayim Atzmo Mevato Chavero, V'tovsin Eshem Mekayim Atzmo Mekayim Chavero. You should choose the interpretation that can be used to explain both, not the interpretation that can be only explaining one. So therefore, Keshata Omer Lifnei Hashem B'Marov, if you were to explain that you're supposed to bring this mincha to the west side, Bat Lasa El Pnei Mizbeach B'Darom, then you've invalidated the pasuk that says you should bring it to the south side, on the face of the Mizbeach. If you bring it to the south side, the face of the Mizbeach, you still have satisfied the pasuk before Hashem. Now, 1 second. How did you kaimsa? How did you fulfill that? You're putting on the face. That's not opposite the Mizbeach. Ravashi says, this is the old opinion that says the entire Mizbeach is in the north side. So therefore, as you walk out of the entrance, you meet the back of the Mizbeach. And so therefore, that's why. Okay, we'll pick up from Maskefla Rav Kahuna. We'll talk about salt tomorrow. Talk about salt next, and we'll continue on going. Why is salt not required if it's written twice in the Psukim? So that's going to be this question.
That's a sneak peek for tomorrow's night stuff.